So I do think that's a way to kind of like microdose minimalism will get the decluttering bug kind of awakened in you. I'm kind of going in order of the easiest to the more advanced. Hi and welcome back to my channel. So in this video, I want to talk about the easiest ways to start decluttering, coming from someone who was a former hoarder turned minimalist. I really don't think that decluttering or minimalist living can be forced. I think that you have to be mentally ready to actually do it, to be able to do it, if that makes any sense. And what I mean by that is if you are used to living with a bunch of stuff, or you're like me, somebody that ties like emotions and almost feelings to items, I think it can be really hard to just decide overnight to declutter your house and become a minimalist. And I don't think trying to do that will lead to a positive outcome. So for me, the reason that I was able to declutter and become a minimalist is because I wanted to move abroad, and I was also trying to live a frugal lifestyle and pay off debt. So the idea of storing things in a storage locker unnecessarily was really not appealing to me, and that kind of forced me to get the ball rolling very quickly. It was kind of like exposure therapy, and it worked, but I would not recommend that approach to everybody. So if you are in the beginning of your decluttering phase and you're having mental blocks, or you find that you're attached to your items and it's really hard to kind of declutter and start living a more minimal life, I think that the following items will help you to get into the mindset of decluttering without feeling like emotional overwhelm or being worried that you're going to have regrets. And then once you do get the ball rolling with these easier items to declutter, it's definitely a lot easier to kind of like build up your tolerance to decluttering and then start working on maybe the things that you're more nervous to consider letting go of. So I put together a list of what I think are the easiest things to start decluttering if you don't really have decluttering experience, or if you have emotional attachment to items like I did. Thinking back to who I was before I was kind of forced to mass declutter, the items on this list I think are a lot easier to kind of wrap your head around getting rid of. So let's get into it. So the first one is definitely the easiest. It's garbage, but hear me out. I feel like I was in my hoarding era. I definitely was not the tidiest person either. So by garbage, I mean really going through your entire house and finding anything that's kind of like slipped through the cracks. So some of the major things that I thought of that I personally know I had in my house and sometimes still do are things like receipts that kind of just build up in the bottom of your purse, or like going through junk drawers and not dealing with the junk and the random stuff, but finding things like takeout menus or old sunscreen bottles or whatever it is in your junk drawers that are clearly garbage and just getting rid of them. Another thing that I think of is like empties that might be in your bathroom, or basically anything that you would consider garbage that's just kind of like lurking around. I strongly encourage you to either do it all in one go or take it step by step, depending on, you know, the size of your living space. But I think going through and kind of like picking out anything that's deemed garbage, it can just help you take stock of what's around you, and also like you'll feel like you're making progress. Like I know for me personally, if I let my tote bag that I use for grocery shopping get too stuffed with receipts, which I do let that happen a lot, like once a week, or more like probably once a month, when I go through and get rid of all of the receipts that are in my tote bag, it just feels like lighter and more manageable. The next one is going through your cosmetics. So I was somebody that had a ton of cosmetics. I was always buying like things that were recommended by influencers or things that just looked cool. And I didn't really end up using most of it. So I think if you go through your cosmetics and you really get rid of like empty bottles or things that are long expired, or things that you've tried and you didn't really like that you've had for a while and you know you won't use again. Those are all pretty easy things to just toss and not feel guilty or feel regret over. And having a more streamlined sort of like cosmetic setup will help give you that taste of not necessarily minimalism, but being more intentional with your purchases. Like for me now, I love that my cosmetic area is only things that I use on a daily or weekly basis. It makes it so much easier to get ready and it just looks cleaner. So I do think that's a way to kind of like microdose minimalism without having to deal with the emotional side of it yet. And the same goes for medicine. So if your medicine cabinet is pretty overstuffed, I definitely recommend sorting by date, seeing what's already expired, or taking a look at the medicine that you maybe bought like on a whim when you weren't feeling well. So like for me, I used to have a lot of indigestion, so I had a lot of like Pepto-Bismol and stuff like that was nearing its expiration date, but also I never used it, so it was easy to kind of just let that go. And then kind of the same idea is looking through your kitchen pantry and your fridge and freezer. So this doesn't happen to me anymore, but for a while, I kind of had like an overstuffed pantry that I definitely wasn't making the best use of. So like things would get pushed to the back and then, you know, you pull it out all that time later and it's already been expired for, you know, months or years. So I think if you are feeling bold, taking everything out of your pantry and laying it out like you would if you were decluttering like your clothes or your books or whatever, and taking inventory of everything, and then tossing the things that are long expired and donating the unopened things that you know you're not going to use. I think that's another great way to kind of microdose minimalism, because by the time you're done, it's like, okay, the expired food's gone, the food that you know you're not going to cook is gone, then your pantry is more streamlined and you know everything that's in it. And I think that also gives a really good taste of what it's like to live a minimalist lifestyle. I'm kind of going in order of the easiest to the more advanced in terms of decluttering, but I think the next one that's relatively easy to handle is linens. So if you have old linens that have holes in them or stains that you keep in your pantry for if you have like many guests over and you need that additional linen item, it's probably safe to let those go. I don't think anyone really wants to sleep on linens that have holes or stains in them anyways. The same goes for towels. I think I'm a little bit less particular with towels. Like towels, especially if you use them for the beach or whatever, it's kind of normal for them to get a little stained. But I think going through your towels and getting rid of the ones that are clearly past their prime, it's not going to hurt you. I haven't fact checked this, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of animal rescue places will take like towels and linens that are past their prime and they'll use them for either rags or for bedding for animals. So if you don't necessarily want to just toss the linens into the garbage, it could be worth looking into something like that. The next one I think is a universal problem. Maybe not, I don't know, let me know in the comments, but it's that loose box of cords and cables that you kind of just hold on to forever because you don't really know what everything goes to. I think it can be worth, if you're nervous to get rid of something that you think might go with an electronic that you have, it could be worth taking out all of the cords that you have, dividing them into ones that you know you'll never use and you're just kind of holding on to. Like maybe it's those old iPhone cables that kind of get the turtleneck on them and only work half the time, like those can go. Or like older iPhone cables to phones that you don't even have anymore. And then the cables that you kind of have a question mark around, you can sort those into a different box, set a date, like a time limit on them, and then if like say in 3 to 6 months, if you've never reached for any cables from that box, it's probably safe to get rid of them. I also feel like it's relatively easy to find replacement cables online. So like, you know, if 3 years down the road you realize that one of the cables you threw out was to, I don't know, like a random electronic that you now need, it's pretty easy and relatively cheap to find a replacement cable. And I think the peace of mind and like the freed up space from getting rid of those cables is probably going to be worth it versus the worry of needing to buy a replacement cable one day down the road. So the next one is kitchen equipment and appliances. I feel like it's pretty common to have like single-use appliances that you probably never use. Like you bought thinking you'd use it all the time, but it's actually just sat collecting dust in your pantry for years. So anything like that, like, I don't know, like a waffle maker that you bought, but you never make waffles, or like a juicer that you bought when you were in a healthy era, but you've never ended up making juice because it's such a pain. All of those take up a lot of space in your kitchen, and if you don't use them, it's better to donate them for somebody else to maybe use and love. And then there are other things too in the kitchen that kind of lurk. So I recommend going through your drawers and maybe fishing out the single-use cutlery that you've had in there forever that you thought you'd use, or like the zucchini spiralizer that's been sitting there for years that you don't use. Or if you have, like, I've been guilty of this, like you buy a can opener and then, or actually no, a better example is when you buy a corkscrew because you think you don't have one, or you go out for like a picnic or whatever and you realize you don't have a corkscrew for your wine, or like, you know, a bottle opener for your beer or whatever. I feel like it's very common to have many of those in a single drawer. So like duplicates of things that you bought like in an emergency situation, those can probably go pretty easily. And it's the same thing, like having less stuff in your kitchen drawers, I think will feel like such a breath of fresh air that it will get the decluttering bug kind of awakened in you. And then if you make it through all of those with relative ease, I think the next one should be going through your clothes. I know for me, clothing was a bit of a difficult category because I hold a lot of memories based on outfits I was wearing or like who gave me a certain garment. But I think a good way to start tapping into decluttering clothes is to go through your clothes and find things that have holes or stains. Like, I feel like it's so common to have things with holes that you just kind of like put in the back of your closet and say that you'll repair one day and then never do. Obviously, don't declutter things that you actually would like to repair and continue wearing, but like, I think a good entry point is like socks with holes in them, or stuff that has been demoted to sleepwear because it's stained, like anything that you don't wear with pride and doesn't, like, you don't have memories necessarily attached to it. I think it can be a good way to kind of build up the muscle and the tolerance to clothing decluttering. And then finally, once you've gotten through this list, I feel like another great way to get the ball rolling with decluttering is to really go through your whole house with a bag, or like maybe two bags, like one for donations and one for garbage, and just pick things that you don't really have an attachment to. Like, just look around. It could be any category, really. Like, I think even when I was in my like more of a hoarder phase and like really felt uncomfortable decluttering, I could still go through like my bookshelf and be like, okay, like this book I bought and I didn't enjoy it, so I don't mind donating it. Or like, this decor item was from a completely different time in my life and I know I'll never use it again. And I think if you're able to just start filling bags with stuff, like not going through a whole category, but just like easy stuff that you look at and you're like, why do I even have this? Like, I think even if it's just a bag, a small bag, or like a garbage bag or whatever, it will still make a difference and still, like I keep saying, build up the decluttering muscle so that you get more and more used to the idea of letting things go. And then I have a bonus tip here at the end. Like I said, I feel like decluttering did not come naturally to me at all. I was like definitely a borderline hoarder for most of my life, and it was only when I decided to move abroad and was kind of going through financial trouble that I realized I couldn't afford to hold on to all of my stuff. Not only that I couldn't afford to, but it was also holding me back from like living a dream that I wanted so badly. And that realization kind of started shifting the gears in my head, I think, like realizing what all of this stuff that was basically junk was holding me back from. It really, I don't know, it made me start questioning like if I really needed to hold on to these things. But in tandem with that, I read 2 books that are very popular, but I think that if you are struggling to like get your mind into the idea of decluttering, one of them, the most famous one, is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I recommend that book so strongly. I read it probably 3 times. I feel like even on the first read, like it did make a difference for me, and I did go through a phase where I was decluttering, but I definitely was still selective and had emotional ties to my items. And then the other one that made a big difference for me is a book called Goodbye Things. They're both really quick reads, but I think if you read them, it just makes you start reflecting on why you're holding on to things. And it's kind of a good reminder, if you're anything like me, that items do not hold, like items don't have emotions. So, and not only that, but if you get rid of an item, you're not getting rid of the memories attached to that item. But yeah, they're like the nuggets that you can take away from those 2 books. I think it varies person to person, but they're definitely both worth reading if you do want to not necessarily become a minimalist, but just start decluttering and living more intentionally. I recommend both of them. I think decluttering should be looked at as a marathon and not a sprint, especially for people who are sensitive like me. It can be really hard to get started, but I do think it's a muscle that you can build. And I think it's worth it if you have the inkling to declutter and live more minimally or just more intentionally. It is really worth it to try to build that muscle. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions about how I got more of a decluttering mindset, because I'm happy to share. Yeah. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.